Rev up your engines!
Well, Tesla's artificial intelligence head, Carpathy, has left. He's resigned the company. Now, I worked for him for 5 years. He was leading their autopilot feature that isn't so auto as one might think. How they can call it self-driving system when it isn't is beyond me, but I guess you could say whatever you want these days. And of course, he gave the usual political BS as he left, kissing everyone's heinies. He said, and I quote, "It's been a great pleasure to help Tesla towards its goals for the last 5 years, and a difficult decision to part ways." Well, if you ask me, the rats are starting to jump off the sinking ship there. Realize that Tesla vehicles have accounted for 70% of the assisted driving crashes in the world since June 2021. Now, if you want a little history, late in 2016, old Elon said, by 2017, we'll have a self-driving system that can go across the country from LA to New York. And guess what? It hasn't happened yet. He also said they would have 1 million robot-ready taxis ready by 2020. That hasn't happened either. And Tesla also closed a Tesla office in San Mateo, California that did a bunch of the artificial intelligence self-driving stuff. Obviously, they're starting to move away. Mr. Carpathy has now left the building along with Elvis. Sharko92 says, can I delay changing my spark plugs? I got a 2012 Lexus with 50,000 miles. It runs like a champ. Lexus says change the spark plugs at 60,000. I have to take off the intake manifold. Should I change them or not? It runs fine. Leave it alone. Those have iridium plugs. I've seen iridium plugs go 200,000 miles, and they're still running perfectly fine. I've never seen them wear out before 100,000. Say when you got 100,000 miles. If you want, yeah, the back three, you got to take off the intake manifold, the pain in the butt, right? But the front three are easy to get to. Take one out. Get the spark plug out and measure the gap with the little gap measuring. And if the gap, say, is supposed to be 40 thousandths of an inch and it's still 40 thousandths of an inch, maybe 42 or 43, but not anymore, it's still good, leave it in. If it's opened up a lot more, like it's 50, 55, then I'd change them all. But I mean, I've seen those things go 200,000 miles. And yes, you do have to take the intake manifold off to get to those back three, and it's a pain in the butt. But iridium spark plugs can last a really long time, as long as your car's not burning oil that will foul them up. And most Lexuses do not burn oil. JS says, why are my ABS brake and traction control warning lights on? Been a fan for years. My 2012 Camry has 3 lights on at the same time. ABS, brake, and traction control. There's no change. Comes on and off by itself. If those are the only 3 that are coming on, something's going on with the brake system. If your check engine light ever comes on, that will often trigger those 3 lights to come on. It's a software thing with Toyota. But since you're only getting that, here's something that could easily be your problem. You might be a little low on brake fluid. The brake fluid has to be at a certain level. In your brake master cylinder, there's a float. And if it gets too low, the float sinks, it'll turn those lights on. But then when your car heats up, the fluid expands from heat, and then the light goes off because the float's a little bit higher. So check your brake fluid and fill it to the top line if it's low. That could easily fix it. Now, if that doesn't fix it, you got a failure in one of those systems, or it thinks it has a failure. So then you pay a guy like me with a high-level scan tool, and we analyze it all and see, gee, is there a problem in the brake pressure switch? Is there a leak in the system? You never know what it could be, but often it's just because you're a little low on brake fluid and you add a little bit and it goes off. And that would make sense that it comes and goes, because when it's really cold, the fluid shrinks and then the light can come on, but then when it heats up, the fluid expands a little and the float gets higher and the light turns off. I see that all the time. Jason says I got a Ford Taurus. The AC goes in and out. Mechanics can't figure it out. Sometimes it's hot. Sometimes it's cold. Not all the time, just intermittently. We check for leaks. Check the blend door actuator. Any got any ideas? Here is the problem. It is a Ford Taurus. Ford's AC system is completely computerized. It runs through computer systems, right? And there's a zillion things that could go wrong. First thing, have somebody put gauges on the low and high side. See if it's low on refrigerant. It'll do that if it's low on refrigerant. They all leak a little bit over time. Check that. Pray it's that. Now, if it's not that, there's so many things that can go wrong. You pay a guy like me who has the dealer level scan tool, and we can do bi-directional testing of everything, the blend doors, the computer system, to see if there's a failure. AC has nothing to do with the pollution in your car, so a regular check engine light won't come on if you got an AC problem. But our fancy computers will read AC trouble codes too, and it might say this blend door actuator's bad or this relay's going bad, and we can replace that part. You got to test rather than guess, but first, First, have the AC pressure tested. It might just be low on refrigerant. It's the simplest thing to do, and you can fix it that way. Spike61 says, should I buy an engine from a junkyard? Got an 03 Nissan Sentra. The engine's going. Should I get a used engine or should I junk the car? What should I do? If I got to get another car, the most I can spend is $5,000. All right, well, it is a Nissan Sentra. The Nissans are poorly made. The engines have problems. You buy a used engine, you're probably buying somebody's problems for two reasons. That car is in a junkyard. Maybe they didn't take care of it and the engine's no good, and that's one of the reasons they junked it. And even if it wasn't a blown engine, maybe it was rear-ended, so you're talking about a 20-year-old used engine. I would not gamble with that. The Nissan Sentras, they're junk. If you can spend $5,000, find an old Toyota or Honda. They can go 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles. Find an old one and get that instead. The engines are much better. They're better made. Pay a guy like me to check out. If he says, yeah, it's a good car, buy it. Don't put any money into an engine on a Nissan like that. It's just a straight out gamble. And a used engine in a company that has problems with engines would be a big mistake. You don't want to do that. You're better off saying goodbye car, getting a good used Toyota or Honda. Maybe it'll be older, maybe the paint's a little chipped or had hail damage, but they can last so much longer than a Nissan. And neither of them really have engine problems, Hondas or Toyotas. AMC72 says, has anyone used Fuel Factor X? It's a gasoline additive that adds more mileage. Has anyone used it? Most additives that say they get better gas mileage and stuff are a scam. You get a modern car, it's getting about 99% of the gas mileage that out of the gasoline that it can if it's running correctly, and you can't get any more. That last 1% is almost impossible to get out. There are cleaners that work. My friend Bernie in Albuquerque has the ATS, Automatic Test Solution Cleaner, and it does clean. Let's say you got an old car and the fuel injectors are all carboned up and clogged, right? Then instead of spraying a nice cone-shaped spray of fuel, it'll be all blobby. It'll get crappy gas mileage. If you're getting crappy gas mileage in a car like that, and you put a can of the ATS in the gas tank and drive it a couple hundred miles, you may find you get better gas mileage because it cleans it up. Now, you won't get better gas mileage than you will when the car was new and was, say, if it was rated for 25, it'll go back to 25 because it will clean it all. But there's no magical thing that you're going to get better gas mileage with by putting it in the gas tank. It just doesn't exist. Some guys say, oh, we have a catalyst, magic this. No. Now, if you have a car that has problems, yes, and it's the injectors that are dirty, and it cleans them, or you have carbon buildup on the valves, and it cleans the carbon buildup, you will get better gas mileage, but nothing better than what it was rated at when it was built in the first place. Cape said, should I turn the AC off before switching off my car? Doesn't make sense. Is it useful? Now, back in the day, people used to turn things off before they shut the car off. They didn't want to strain the battery, the starter, or the devices themselves. They'd turn the headlights, everything off. Modern cars have what are called electrical relays. They're safety devices. And there's really no need to anymore because the relay, if there's any kind of voltage surge, the relay takes it and not the device itself. Way back when they didn't have hardly any relays, yeah, when you started the car, that voltage surge could pop any kind of device if it was turned on when you start the car. But modern ones have relays, and it really doesn't matter all that much. It really doesn't make any difference. And many cars, when you start the car, it doesn't send power to the AC and stuff anyways until the car starts. Everything's computerized these days. They do have safety devices. So it's not something that really means anything in any modern. Yours is a 2011, so it really doesn't need to be done. But, I mean, if you forget things, what the heck, why not? And then you're driving around with it on when you don't want it on, you might just turn everything off. I generally do just from old habit because I'm an old guy and I remember when I damaged the car, so I like starting the car fresh with nothing on, then I decide where I want everything before I get going. Christopher says, how often should I change the oil in my 2012 Camry? My dad bought it used with over 100,000 miles. It burns a little oil. I drive it 15,000 miles a year, and I've had it since November 2020. When should I change it? You're driving 15,000 miles a year. I would change it every 5 months. If you do stop and go, I would change it every 5,000 miles with full synthetic oil, right? But if you do a lot of highway driving, you can take it a little bit further. Now, you got to change it at least once a year, but you're doing 15,000 miles a year, so I would say every 4 or 5 months, I would change the thing just to keep it clean, and you don't have any problems. It burns a little oil, but I mean, really, I don't on how often you're changing it. If you find you change it every 4,000 or 5,000 miles, you'll probably find that you're not really going to lose all that much oil, because those 2012s don't burn all that much oil. That's not like the 2007 that had piston ring problems. So if you change the oil every 5,000 miles or so, you'll probably find you hardly lose all that much oil. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.